We are joined now by, I want to say friend of the show, representative, state
she is
representative.
A friend of the show. What you talking about? She's
Can we claim people, or people have to? Or is that something we can say, or they say it themselves?
If you've been on this show one time, that's enough for us to be like, "That's our cousin." What you talking about? That's our cousin.
Cousin is on the screen. State Representative Renitta Shannon. She is from Georgia's 84th Congressional District. And she is also, I'm just finding out, a candidate for lieutenant governor in the state of Georgia. First and foremost, welcome back to the show. Good morning. How are you?
Let's go.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for having me. And yes, you can claim me as your cousin. That is
cuz. So now that we're all family, I want to just start, before we talk about all the crazy things that's happening, I do want to talk about how excited I am to hear that you're running for lieutenant governor. Tell us what made you decide to jump out there and how it's going.
Thank you. So, yes, I'm running for lieutenant governor. Things are going great with the campaign. I'm running because the regressive policies in Georgia have just created such a harsh reality for so many folks in Georgia, particularly working Georgians. And we really need a sea change in policy. I've spent my legislative career finding harm in legislation and knowing policy well enough to be able to find the harm, particularly for Black and brown folks, and then fighting against it. So this is really me taking it to the next level to make sure that we can have government that is truly representative and not just passing policies that benefit the folks who've been able to vote for the longest in this country, white men, because that's really what most of our policy looks like in the state of Georgia and across the country.
Wow. Yeah, now the reason we brought you on, I mean, you could come on anytime you want to, because Georgia Republicans have passed a bill that would transfer power from the State Board of Election to the Georgia Board of Investigation, law enforcement agency, to investigate elections. Now, I had a chance to talk with you about this yesterday. Could you just, before we jump into it, help us to understand what Republicans are doing on the state level and why it is detrimental?
Sure. So this is a prime example of what I was talking about. People not understanding the harm that's being created in policy, particularly for Black and brown communities when they advance these policies. HB 1464 is a bill that basically would allow the GBI to have first line jurisdiction to be able to investigate elections. So when you think about this, it's similar to what Florida's trying to do with the election police. And so one of the things that I did when I spoke against this bill was remind folks of what happened in Quitman, Georgia, when a handful of Black folks, predominantly Black women, decided to try to have some Black representation in a county that was majority Black but had all white representation. This was in 2010. Brian Kemp was still the Secretary of State. And let me tell you, he had these Black seniors arrested 4 days before Christmas for having the audacity to flip a seat and gain representation in Georgia. Wow. And as a part of that process, he involved the GBI to investigate the elections. The entire event was so stressful that one of the folks who was being investigated actually died awaiting trial. And so yes, it's shocking because that sounds like something out of the 1960s, but it's not. This happened in 2010. And these are the things that folks need to, at a time where Republicans across the country are trying to make sure that we don't have an accurate teaching of history or that history is not taught at all. We need to understand history because these policies are good for everyone.
Yeah,
that's right.
I mean, I think this ties right into the representation of, like you said, all of these leaderships, these white men and their fear of us teaching this. Like this was in 2010, you said. This sounds like it was something out of the 1960s or before. I mean, but this happened in 2010 right here in Georgia. And these white men, these white leaders walk around here abusing, Black people, Black constituents, Black people flipping seats, Black people coming in. They don't look at them as if they should be deserving of these spaces, right? Because they know how powerful Black people in these spaces will be, just like you, Renitta, just like you, as you are taking on this role to become lieutenant governor. I mean, how has that been for you, even knowing what our representation already looks like and what he has done and what he may be able to do? How does that look like for you?
Well, so people know my legislative track record. They know that I'm a person who's unafraid to speak truth to power, and that I know policy. I make it my business to read every single bill. My colleagues know me as the bill reader, and that's important because when you are trying to create legislation that will protect everybody and make sure that no community falls through the cracks, the folks who are the best to do that are Black queer women like myself who are at the intersection of so many different identities. They understand where the harm is going to be created. So the campaign is going well. People, I always say I always run because of the issues. And so that is what has led me to run for lieutenant governor.
I love that. That's fearless. That's unapologetic. And I also saw that. I mean, you say you read, right? I saw that you there was a video of you, and you were saying when everybody else is gone, I'm there reading. I'm over here going over and combing through. And how does that make a difference for you? Does that make you more knowledgeable against the rest? How does that make a difference for you?
It does, because I have to say that's one of the things that was very shocking to me entering the legislature in 2017 was that most of the folks who are in office are just listening to their political parties about how to vote on bills. But when you come from a background of community organizing like myself, you understand that both parties have a tendency to create harm, especially for Black and brown communities. And so it's important that we are understanding that policy is more than just words on a paper. It actually has impact on communities. And so for me, that has been reading every single piece of legislation and understanding where folks can fall through the cracks and what will not be good for us. And so HB 1464 is a prime example. If you look at my speech on the floor, before I talked about how Black seniors have literally been prosecuted by the GBI for just having the audacity to run for election and win, I also talked about some of the poor language in the bill, using the word handling of ballots and making it a crime if you don't have a poll official present. And so one of the things I brought up was the language is so loose and so poor in this bill. What does the word handle? And so when you have language that's so poor and so loose in these bills, what happens is prosecution becomes subjective. And we know that means that Black and brown folks are going to feel the brunt of loose language.
That's right. That's right. That's my concern. We have a clip of you speaking to that exact point. I want us to play a portion of that because my concern is this: with this legislation, they're rewriting what's legal. I mean, I know that's obvious, right? But they're making it very, very possible for Republicans to get away with voter suppression, to get away with these different tactics that are going to make it almost impossible for Black people to maintain power. You spoke so eloquently about it. Let's play a couple of minutes of that clip, Dwayne.
I rise to speak in opposition to House Bill 1464. Several provisions in this bill really are written so loosely, and the language is so poor that there's really not a way to comply with this bill. There's really not a way to know if you are complying with the bill. I want to first draw your attention to Section 12, line 745 through line 751, and I'll read the section. No ballots shall be handled without a poll official being present and without documentation on the chain of custody documentation forms of who is handling such ballots and when and why such ballots are being handled. After the activity requiring the handling of ballots is completed, such ballots shall be resealed in ballot boxes or other secure containers, which shall be recorded and witnessed on chain of custody documentation forms as specified by the Secretary of State and shall be signed by the persons having custody of such ballots. This section is something that I brought up in committee when we saw this provision in a separate bill that came through governmental affairs. The language is written so loosely, and it's requiring you to have a poll official present when ballots are being handled. What does the word handled mean? When you look up the word handled in the dictionary, it says to feel or manipulate with hands. Or a second definition is to manage a situation or a problem. So what are we talking about here? Are we saying that you've got to have a poll official available if you touch a ballot, if you move a ballot? I mean, literally, if you pick up a ballot that falls on the floor, do you have to call a poll official to supervise that?
Representative Shannon, that is, I hear you keep speaking about the unclearness of the language. This sounds like a catch-all trap. What do we do about this?
Yeah.
Well, Ben, it is like you have been in the legislature with me. You're right. The language is so loose because it is a catch-all trap. So that at the end of the day, when Black and brown voters show up to exercise their power, the Republicans will have a way to basically yank that power back and say, okay, you didn't do what you're supposed to do. So what we really need to have folks do is, number one, elect leaders who are committed to creating policy that works for all of us, not just the folks who've been able to vote the longest in this country, which are white men. The second thing we need to do is be reaching out to these elected officials to tell them that we understand what you're doing and we don't like it. This bill has already passed the House. It has not passed the Senate yet. We have time. We need folks who live in Georgia to call the governor and say, we see what you're doing and we don't want you to continue destroying our elections. Veto this bill.
Absolutely. State Representative Renitta Shannon, also candidate for Lieutenant Governor. Thank you for bringing attention to this legislation. And I want to encourage everyone in our audience to do exactly that, to reach out and let them know we have our eye on you. We're not just going to sit by. Thank you so much for your time this morning, sister.
And before you get out of here, let people know how they can support your campaign, how they can follow you, because I think that's really important. Because right here, we're going to stand for Renitta Shannon. So tell people how they can find you.
Thank you so much. Yes, this is very important. Being that I'm a legislator, when we're in active legislation, we cannot accept fundraising. We cannot accept campaign dollars. So beginning April 5th, you will be able to donate to my campaign. We have been in session for 3 months, which means I could not take any contributions for 3 months. I need a lot of help. I need your money. I need your time to volunteer. I need you to share the campaign. So please go to RenittaShannon.com, sign up to be a volunteer, share this interview, share information about the campaign. Again, that's RenittaShannon.com.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm going to that website. Yes. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, sister.
Thank you for having me. Bye, cousins.
Bye,
hey, cuz. Hey.
Bye, cuz.
Yeah.
Bye, cuz.
You see, this is family. And I'm going to tell you why she's family, because, you know, she came on the show. I remember she wanted to come on the show, and I was like, yes, come on. You know, she got a story to tell. And then she brought her sister on. She was like, no, you need to get Park Cannon on here.
That's right.
And then we was like, yes, we do. And, you know, yes, and I think that's family. You know, they're going to be like, y'all know, you don't know Ben and them? You got to get on that show. And she's telling us, you don't know Representative Park Cannon? You know, she got to be on the show. She got to story to tell. So I love it. That's family right there.
Absolutely. Absolutely love it. This is family too. We have a whole lot more